I don't usually talk about what happened that summer in the Appalachians. Not because I think people wouldn't believe me, but because I still don't understand what I saw, or what I heard, or how I made it out. It's been 6 years now, and the woods are still in my dreams. The sound of cicadas building up to that unbearable pitch, the smell of rain and dirt, the way the light filtered through the trees, all yellow and fractured, like it didn't want to touch the ground. I went there alone. That was my first mistake. I was 29, working a desk job I hated, and after a messy breakup, I decided I needed to reconnect with nature. I rented a cabin near the edge of Monongahela National Forest, West Virginia, not far from the border where the mountains start to rise into real wilderness. It wasn't completely isolated. There was a ranger station about 15 miles away, but there were no neighbors, no cell signal, and no paved road. You had to drive half an hour of gravel just to get there. The cabin belonged to an older man named John, who met me by the trailhead to hand off the keys. He was friendly in that distant Appalachian way, polite, quiet, hard to read. Before leaving, he said something that stuck with me. "If you hear anything at night that sounds like it's calling your name, don't answer." I laughed it off, thought it was one of those local folklore things, mountain humor. But he didn't laugh back. He just looked at me a bit too long, then said, "Sound travels strange in these hills." The cabin was small. One room, a cot, a wood stove, and a screened porch facing the trees. No electricity, just gas lamps. I spent that evening walking along the trail that looped around the property. There was an old stone wall half buried in moss, maybe 100 years old, probably from when settlers tried farming up here. By sundown, the forest changed. The air felt heavier, quieter. It wasn't just that the birds stopped, it was like the forest withdrew, listening. That first night, I lay awake, listening to the sounds outside. Insects, the occasional crack of a branch, maybe a fox. Then, sometime after midnight, I heard it. Faint at first, then clearer. A voice. Calling from somewhere down the hill. At first, I thought it was a person, a woman's voice calling a name. Not mine, but close. Something like Aaron or Aaron. It was the tone that got me. It wasn't panic, not distress. It was conversational, like she was expecting someone to answer back. The sound drifted in and out with the wind. I got up, went to the porch, tried to see. Nothing but dark trees and the flicker of lightning far away. Then the voice stopped. I didn't sleep after that. The next morning, I convinced myself it had been some echo, a hiker, or maybe kids fooling around. But something felt different. The forest didn't feel neutral anymore. I decided to hike out to a nearby ridge I'd seen on the map, about 3 miles east. The trail wasn't marked well, and halfway there I found something strange. A line of stones leading downhill, perfectly straight, vanishing into the trees. Not natural, placed there. Maybe a boundary or old property marker. But as I followed it, I realized it went on far too long, straight as an arrow, across ridges and creeks, as if whoever built it didn't care about terrain. And every 100 feet or so, I saw what looked like small piles of animal bones, white, clean, arranged in little spirals. I turned back after an hour. When I returned to the cabin, I found something on the porch. A small stone, smooth and round, placed right in the center of the step. I didn't think much of it at the time. I figured it must have rolled off somewhere. But I remember picking it up. It was warm, like it had been sitting in sunlight, though the porch was shaded all day. That night, the voice came back. Closer. It started the same, faint, somewhere down the hill. Then I heard my name, soft, drawn out, like someone trying to pronounce it exactly the way I do. Daniel. At first, I froze. My rational brain said sound carries weird in valleys. It could be someone camping, a prank. But the voice didn't echo like it should have. It was too close, too direct. It called again. Daniel, it's cold. The sound moved around the cabin, slowly. It circled, like someone walking just beyond the tree line, whispering through the dark. I remember gripping the flashlight so tight my hand went numb. I didn't open the door. I didn't even breathe. After maybe 10 minutes, it stopped. The woods went dead quiet. That kind of silence, you don't realize how loud nature usually is until it stops all at once. No crickets, no wind, no night birds, just a hollow emptiness pressing in on you. When I stepped outside the next morning, I found footprints in the mud near the cabin. Bare feet, small. They came up from the trees, circled the porch twice, and vanished into the ferns. I packed my gear that morning. I'd planned to stay a week, but by day 3, I'd had enough. The problem was, when I tried to start my truck, it wouldn't turn over. The battery was fine. The starter just clicked. I decided to hike to the ranger station instead. I figured I could be there before sundown. About 2 hours into the hike, I came across something that made my stomach drop. The same smooth stone I'd found on the porch, identical, was sitting in the middle of the trail. And next to it, half buried in the dirt, was my flashlight. The same one I'd left by my bed. By late afternoon, clouds rolled in, dark, heavy. The forest dimmed to a kind of bruised green. I followed what I thought was the trail, but somewhere along the way, it disappeared. Every direction started to look the same. No landmarks, no signs, just endless trees. I tried using my compass. It spun erratically, like something was interfering. I'd heard about magnetic anomalies in the Appalachians, but it still scared me. Then I started hearing things again. Not voices this time, just movement. Branches snapping behind me, the soft rush of steps and leaves. Whenever I turned, nothing. I started talking out loud to keep myself grounded, I think. I said things like, "I'm going north, I'm fine, I'll find the ridge soon." But then, at some point, I heard another voice behind me, repeating the same words I had just said. Same tone, same rhythm, just slightly delayed. I ran. When darkness came, it came fast. The sky was a smear of violet and gray, and the rain started not long after. I found a half-collapsed shack, probably an old hunting shelter, and ducked inside for cover. The roof leaked, but it was better than nothing. I built a small fire from what dry wood I could find. That's when I saw the carvings. On the inside of the walls, hundreds of them. Circles, spirals, crude stick figures. And words scratched deep into the wood, layer upon layer. Don't repeat it over and over. I don't remember sleeping, but at some point I must have passed out. I woke up to the sound of whispering, low, fragmented, like someone murmuring right beside my ear. Except the sound came from everywhere, the walls, the ground, the rain. I pressed my hands over my ears, but I could still feel the vibration in my chest. And then, just before dawn, it stopped. When I stepped outside, there were more stones, a trail of them leading back into the forest, smooth, round, identical. I followed them. I don't know why. Maybe exhaustion, maybe something else. They led me to a clearing. In the center was a single dead tree, massive, hollow, split down the middle like lightning had struck it long ago. Inside the hollow was something hanging, a bundle of sticks tied with string, shaped almost like a person. And there, at the base of the tree, was another set of footprints, bare, facing mine. I don't remember the walk back clearly. I remember the light changing, morning bleeding into afternoon, and then suddenly I was back near the road, covered in mud and shaking. A ranger found me around dusk. He said I'd been missing for nearly 2 days. When he asked where I'd been, I told him I'd gotten turned around, spent the night in the woods. I didn't mention the voices, or the stones, or the shack. When I came back to get my truck a week later, I noticed something. Right at the edge of the property, near the first bend of the trail, there was a new marker, a pile of smooth stones stacked neatly. On top of it, someone had placed a piece of weathered wood. Carved into it were 2 words. You heard it. It took months before I could sleep without the forest sounds clawing their way back into my head. Sometimes I still wake up at night, certain I've heard my name whispered just beyond the walls. I've played the memory over and over, trying to rationalize it. Sound bouncing between ridges, exhaustion, dehydration. But there's one thing I can't explain. A week after I got home, I unpacked my gear. Inside one of the side pockets, zipped shut, was that same smooth stone, warm to the touch. I read somewhere that sound can linger in certain environments, trapped between rock and air pressure, like a ghost of vibration. Scientists call it acoustic mirage. Maybe that's all it was. Maybe the mountains were just repeating fragments of my own voice back to me. But sometimes, late at night, when everything's quiet, I still hear it, faint and far away, just at the edge of sleep. It's not calling my name anymore. It's just laughing. I used to work for a survey company that mapped forested land for private developers. Most of the time, it was routine, measuring boundaries, marking trees, noting soil conditions. It paid well enough, and I liked being alone out there. The woods had a kind of rhythm to them that made sense. The quiet order under all the chaos. That was before the Sutter Tract job. We were hired to survey about 20 square miles of forest in the southern Appalachians, close to the North Carolina border. Old mining land, left untouched for decades. The company that bought it wanted to put in access roads and build cabins eventually. It was early spring, the kind of weather where the mornings are mist and the afternoons burn hot. There were 4 of us, me, our crew lead, Tom, a new guy named Eric, and a local we hired as a guide, Caleb. Caleb knew those hills like nobody else. He was quiet, polite, always watching the tree line like he was waiting for something to move. The first few days went smooth. We camped out, worked our grid, marked points, joked around at night. Nothing unusual, except how empty the place felt. No sound of distant roads, no aircraft, not even many birds. Caleb said the land used to belong to an old company town that shut down sometime in the 50s. He said you could still find foundations if you knew where to look. On the 5th day, Tom asked me and Caleb to check a northern section that hadn't been mapped yet, a deep-cut valley, steep on both sides. The terrain looked simple on paper, but once we got there, it was like walking into a different world. The trees grew closer, the ground sank into spongy moss. It smelled of iron and rot, like an old well. After about an hour, Caleb stopped. He looked around, frowning, then said quietly, "We shouldn't be down this far." I asked why. He didn't answer right away. He pointed to the ground instead. There were faint shapes there, indentations in the moss, like someone had laid stones in a pattern long ago and they'd sunk under the soil. Circles, overlapping each other. "I've seen this before," he said, "up near Coldwater Ridge. People used to say it was where the ground don't settle right." "What's that mean?" I asked. He didn't explain. He just said, "We'll go round." We moved uphill, but the valley seemed to curve with us. No matter how far we climbed, we ended up crossing the same patterns again. The air grew thicker, heavier. I remember wiping sweat from my neck and realizing it was cold sweat, not from heat. After another mile, Caleb stopped again. Ahead of us, in a small clearing, stood a row of wooden posts, maybe 10 of them, buried deep into the ground. They looked old, dark with age, but none were broken. Each had a small strip of metal nailed to the top, tarnished and unreadable. "What is it?" I asked. He shook his head. "They weren't here before." I laughed a little, thinking he meant since last year or something. But the look on his face made my stomach twist. He meant they hadn't been here when he'd walked this trail yesterday. We marked the location with GPS and headed back. I remember glancing over my shoulder once and thinking the posts looked closer together than before, like the space between them was shrinking. By the time we got to camp, the sun was almost gone. Tom and Eric had already started a fire. I told them about the posts, showed them the coordinates. Tom thought it was interesting. Maybe an old boundary marker, maybe something left from the mining days. Eric joked that it sounded like Appalachian Stonehenge. But Caleb didn't talk the rest of the night. When I asked if he was okay, he just said, "The ground's wrong there." Then he walked off into the dark and didn't come back for nearly an hour. The next morning, we found our gear moved. Nothing missing, just shifted. My pack was 6 feet from where I'd left it. Tom's sleeping bag was unrolled, as if someone had checked it. We blamed raccoons at first, until we noticed the footprints. Bare, human prints, small, crossing through the dew. They stopped halfway to the trees and vanished, like the person had just walked into the air. Caleb wanted to leave. Tom said no, we had a schedule and no reason to panic. We spent the day working a different section, but the forest felt wrong, distorted. The landmarks didn't line up with our maps anymore. Ridges curved in the wrong direction. Streams split and rejoined where they shouldn't. Every time I took a compass reading, the needle twitched. Around noon, Eric started complaining about a smell. Sweet, metallic, like copper and smoke. I didn't notice it until later, faint, like old pennies soaked in rainwater. Then we found the pipe. It was sticking out of the ground near a dry creek bed, rusted, about as wide as a wrist, capped at the top. At first I thought it was some old ventilation shaft from the mine, but when I crouched near it, I realized there was air coming out, slow and steady, cold as ice. It smelled like that same metallic sweetness. Tom said we'd mark it and come back with equipment. Caleb said we shouldn't mark it at all. He said if it's breathing, you leave it alone. That night Eric didn't come back to camp. We found his pack by the creek, but no sign of him. His radio was on, still hissing static. Tom wanted to organize a search, but we didn't have signal, and the terrain was brutal. We spent half the night calling his name, our flashlights cutting through fog so thick it looked solid. Every sound bounced back at us, our own voices, the crunch of leaves, even our breathing stretched out into echoes that didn't match the rhythm of what we were doing. At one point, I swear I heard Eric call back. It was faint, somewhere above us, up the slope. I shouted for Tom, and we climbed toward it, but when we reached the top, there was nothing, just more forest, dense and dark. Then I saw light through the trees, a lantern glow, steady, warm. I shouted again, and it flickered once, like someone moving it. We followed, stumbling through brush until we reached a small clearing, empty. No lantern, no footprints, just the faint smell of smoke and iron. We went back down at dawn. Eric never turned up. Tom decided to pack out, hike to the truck, and get the Rangers. Caleb refused to go back the same way we'd come. He said the valley wasn't in the same place anymore. We split up. Tom went down the ridge. Caleb and I cut east to find another path. That was the last time I saw Tom. Caleb and I walked for hours without speaking. Around midday, we came across a patch of ground that looked recently disturbed. Soft earth, no leaves. Caleb stopped dead. I asked him what was wrong. He said, "We're walking on top of something." He got down, brushed the soil away, and uncovered one of the same metal strips from the posts, nailed flat into the dirt. Except this one wasn't tarnished. It was clean, shiny, like it had just been placed there. He touched it once, then hissed and pulled his hand back, said it was hot. I reached for it myself. It was cold. We heard movement then. Not close, not far, just steady, like footsteps pacing through the trees. We stood still, waiting for whoever it was to come into view. But the sound just circled us, over and over, until I realized the rhythm was wrong. It wasn't walking, it was breathing. Caleb dropped his pack. "Run," he said. "Don't stop. Don't turn around." I ran until my lungs burned. Branches whipped my face, and the air grew sharp, metallic. Somewhere behind me, I heard him shout once, and then nothing. When I finally stopped, I was on a different slope entirely. The trees were thinner here, the light clearer. I found an old fence, barbed wire sagging between rotted posts, and followed it until it led me to a dirt road. A ranger truck was parked half a mile down. They found me sitting in the road, covered in mud and shaking. The search for Tom and Eric lasted 2 weeks. They found nothing. Caleb's name wasn't on any official record. Turns out he'd never signed the company contract. The forest tract was closed afterward. The official reason was unstable ground conditions. But I went back once, a year later, just to see. I stopped at the gate, looked out toward the ridge. Everything was green and quiet. Then I noticed something, just past the tree line, half hidden in the brush. A row of wooden posts, dark with age, standing in perfect alignment. I told myself they'd always been there, that I was imagining the faint shimmer of metal on their tops. But as I turned to leave, the air shifted. For just a second, I heard it again, that slow, steady sound rising from the hills, like the forest itself was taking a breath. And it wasn't until I got back to my truck that I realized what was wrong with the road dust on my boots. It smelled faintly, unmistakably, of iron and smoke. I've spent my whole life hiking.
I've been in deep woods from Colorado to Montana to Maine, and nothing ever rattled me the way people like to climb. Bears, storms, getting off trail. Those things don't scare me. They're just problems to solve. But what happened in the Appalachians 2 years ago? That's the kind of thing I still can't say out loud without a long pause in the middle. I wasn't running from anything in life. I wasn't soul searching. I wasn't doing some find myself in nature trip. I was simply documenting old civilian conservation corps structures for a restoration project. Stone shelters, forgotten fire towers, rested culverts. Most were easy to reach. But one of them, the one that changed everything, was marked on the map as something like Unverified Stone Foundation, Presumed CCC Origin. Basically, nobody had checked it in decades. The location was deep in a part of the Appalachians where the terrain turns into long, sloping folds of land, like waves frozen in dirt and trees. I planned a simple 3-day loop, in and out, nothing challenging. The first sign that things were off came early, but in such a subtle way that I ignored it. The trail I was on, the official trail with blazes and everything, had a strange feel to it. Not eerie, not threatening, just wrong geometrically, like the angles of the land didn't line up with what the map said. The trail dipped when it should have leveled. It rose when it should have run flat. But maps have errors. Trails shift, so I didn't think much about it. Around mid-afternoon, I reached a narrow ridge where the trees suddenly opened just enough for a view. The strange part was the valley below, one I didn't recognize. It wasn't on the topographic map. The shape was wrong. The stream in it didn't exist on paper, and the far slope was too steep, like a wall. I took a picture, marked my GPS. The coordinates were nonsense, somehow placing me nearly 2 miles west of where I should have been, even though I'd followed a straight, well-marked trail. I told myself it was tree cover interfering with the signal. Happens all the time. By evening, I reached the approximate area of the old foundation. The forest there felt ancient in a different way, less Appalachian, more European. Old. Thick moss, fat roots like coiled ropes, and huge stones half swallowed by earth. No wildlife sounds, not like silence, just absence. I set camp 50 yards from a small mossy mound that, according to my map, should have been the remains of the foundation. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because of fear, because I kept feeling like someone was walking past my tent every so often. Not hearing them, feeling them. The ground has a weight when someone steps on it. Even soft leaves transmit it in a faint way. But there was no sound, no footsteps, just occasional vibrations, barely there. I'm a rational man. I chalked it up to my own heartbeat, to the slight sway of the ground, to anything but the idea of someone actually circling my tent. By dawn, the feeling stopped. The foundation wasn't just a foundation. When I brushed away the moss and soil with my gloves, I realized I wasn't uncovering the remains of a building. I was uncovering the top of a structure, like the ceiling of something buried. The stones were rigidly shaped, squared off, fitted too perfectly for erosion to explain. They weren't CCC-era crude stonework. They were older, much older. The kind of stone you see in 1700s root cellars, or even 1600s frontier ruins. But this wasn't a cellar. The pattern was too large. I found what looked like an edge, dug a few inches around it, and discovered a straight line of stone descending downward, like a wall. My first instinct was excitement, archaeological gold. But the deeper I brushed, the more I felt something gnawing at my nerves. Not fear, something else, like I wasn't supposed to reveal what was beneath. I put my ear against the stone. Cold, too cold for the morning temperature. No vibration, no sound, just a faint sense of depth beneath it. I kept working carefully until I found something that made me stop entirely. A corner, perfect right angle, sharp edges, no weathering. Whatever this was, it had been preserved unnaturally well underground. As I cleared more moss, my hand slipped forward and touched a different texture. Metal. A hinge. Not modern, not rusted entirely either. Iron, but thick, heavy, shaped by hand. And beside it, buried under leaves, a handle. A door. An entrance leading down. The door wasn't large, maybe 3 feet wide, 4 feet tall. Something a person could squeeze through, not walk through comfortably. But it was unmistakably a door. My stomach tightened. Suddenly, the cold air didn't feel cold enough. The forest around me, the old trees, the moss, the slanted light, felt like a painting. Too still. I grabbed my flashlight from the pack, knelt in front of the door, and pulled. It didn't budge at first. Then the whole thing shifted with a deep, grinding sound, not echoing, absorbed by the earth. When it finally cracked open, the smell hit me. Not rot, not mold. Cold. An impossible cold. The air from inside the door was at least 30 degrees lower than the outside temperature. And it wasn't just cold, it felt old, thick, like stepping into a basement that hasn't been opened in centuries. The darkness inside wasn't normal darkness. My flashlight beam went maybe 5 feet before dissolving into a kind of dense black, like fog, but not fog. Every instinct told me, don't go in. Every bit of logic told me, document it, then leave. But curiosity does dangerous things to the mind. I leaned in and shone the light again. I could just barely make out the top of a staircase leading downward, carved from stone. Each step was too shallow, too narrow, almost shaped for smaller feet. The kind of stairs built when people were shorter, or when the builders weren't exactly human-sized. Suddenly, the cold rushing from below pulsed. Not air movement, just a pressure, a shift. I stepped back instantly. The forest behind me looked different, like I'd stepped into a subtly altered version of where I'd been before opening the door. The slope of the land felt wrong. The trees seemed arranged differently. Even the sunlight looked angled. I closed the door. Or I tried to. It wouldn't shut completely. Something in the ground kept it propped, half open. No amount of force made it seal the way it had before. I don't know why that felt like a major, irreversible mistake, but it did. Like closing it before had kept things separate. And now that it was open, even by a few inches, the separation was broken. I packed my things as fast as I could. Didn't eat, didn't sit, didn't even catch my breath. I just wanted distance. But the trail back didn't exist anymore. Not erased, not relocated. Just wrong. A A ridge I crossed on the way in was steeper now, too steep to climb. A stream bed had shifted 30 feet to the left. A fallen tree I walked under the day before was gone, vanished without a trace, not cut, not moved, just not there anymore. The land wasn't the same land. Either the map was wrong, my memory was wrong, or the terrain had changed in the last 12 hours. I didn't believe any of those. I walked for 2 hours before I realized I was going in a circle. Not because I saw the same trees or rocks, because I saw the door again. The buried doorway. The same mound, the same patch of moss I had brushed aside. Except this time, the door was open wider. Not wide enough to see inside, just a few inches more. But that meant something had moved it from the inside. A wave of nausea hit me so hard I actually had to kneel and breathe slow. I held my flashlight up, shining it into the gap. Stone stairs visible, cold pouring out. But something else caught my eye. The leaves on the ground near the doorway weren't lying flat. They were bent outward, like something had pushed them aside while climbing out. I didn't stay. I sprinted downhill. No pack now, I left it behind, just flashlight and map in hand. I didn't care which way I went, as long as it was away. But distance didn't matter, because within an hour, I saw it a third time. Same mound, same stone pattern, but this time the door was wide open. My chest tightened, sweat dripped into my eyes. My hands shook so violently I almost dropped the flashlight. There were no footprints, no signs of anything emerging, just a trail of disturbed leaves leading a short distance into the woods and ending abruptly, as if whatever came out simply stopped touching the ground. I backed away slowly. At that moment, the forest light dimmed, clouds rolling in. But it felt faster than clouds, like the forest itself darkened, the green dampening into a deeper hue. I started walking again, not running, too afraid to slip, to fall, to turn my back completely on what might be following. The slope gradually leveled into a long, wide depression between two hills. It looked familiar, like the valley I'd seen the day before, but something was off. The stream was gone, completely dry. The ground cracked like it hadn't held water in years. But last night, I heard it flowing. I kept moving. Eventually, I found a trail marker nailed to a tree. Relief flooded through me like adrenaline. But as I approached, my stomach twisted. The marker was wrong. Same shape, same yellow paint, but the symbol wasn't anything used by the Park Service. Not a blaze, not a distance marker, nothing. A hand-carved symbol of several intersecting lines, almost like a star, but not a star. Angles too sharp, too irregular. And the carving was fresh, not weathered, not old. Fresh. I didn't touch it. Just seeing it made my skin crawl. I turned back and froze, because the forest looked different again. Subtly. Trees weren't where they had been 5 seconds earlier. A large boulder that had been at my 10 o'clock was now directly ahead. The ground felt slightly tilted, not dramatically, just enough for the rational part of my mind to start losing its grip. I kept walking, choosing a direction at random. 15 minutes later, I came upon the ridge again. Not the ridge from before, a different one, higher, sharper. And from the top of it, I saw something that made every hair on my arms lift. The valley below, stretching wide and long. was wrong. The landforms were warped slightly, like a near-perfect replica of the terrain I knew, but altered, as if someone recreated the Appalachians from memory and got certain angles incorrect. Even the colors looked off. Trees too uniform in height, grass too smooth, rocks too angular, like a model, a constructed landscape. And in the far distance, nestled at the bottom of that impossible valley, lights. Not fire, not lanterns, cold white lights, arranged in a perfect grid. Impossible geometry inside wilderness where no town ever existed. I backed down the ridge slowly. I remember whispering to myself, I don't belong here. I'm not supposed to be here. Not as a prayer, but as a simple fact. The forest didn't answer. It didn't need to. Because one moment I was staring into that strange, impossible valley, and the next, I blinked, and I was standing at the edge of my campsite from the first night. My tent was still there. My pack was still leaned against the tree. But they were wrong too. The tent fabric had dew on it, but too much dew, like it hadn't been touched in days. The pack looked sun-faded, as if exposed longer than 48 hours. Even the ground beneath my boots seemed tired, like time itself ran different here. I didn't stay to investigate. I grabbed my pack, didn't check it, didn't look at anything else, just slung it over my shoulder and walked with the kind of focus you only get when fighting panic. I chose one direction and stuck with it, not because I knew it was right, because it was the only direction where the light, the real normal light, seemed stronger. I ignored everything around me, the shifting terrain, the repeating landmarks, the feeling that the forest rearranged itself when I wasn't looking, the sense that something was watching not from behind, but from all sides at once. I walked until my legs shook, walked until the sun was high again, walked until I finally heard something natural, a road, a real road. I stumbled onto asphalt so cracked it looked abandoned, but it was unquestionably a road, a Forest Service road with paint peeling on the marker posts. I followed it for nearly 2 hours before I saw a ranger truck. The ranger who found me said I looked like I had heat stroke, even though the air was cool. He said my pack was sun-bleached in a way that didn't match the 3 days I claimed I'd been gone. He drove me back to the station. I filled out a basic incident report. They sent someone to check the coordinates I'd logged. They found nothing. No mound, no stone foundation, no door, not even disturbed ground. The place was just flat forest floor. I know what I saw. And sometimes, at night, when I close my eyes, I still feel that pressure in the air, the shift that happened when I opened that door the first time. I don't think I brought anything back with me, but sometimes I dream of that valley, the impossible one, with the grid of cold white lights. And each time I'm a little closer to it, not in the dream, in distance, actual distance, like it's pulling me in my sleep. I haven't gone back to the Appalachians since, but I have a feeling one day I will. Not because I choose to, but because whatever was beneath that door wasn't meant to stay buried, and I wasn't meant to walk away.